Hello friends, in this video we are going to show custom paging in grid using MVC5 code first and entity framework. In this video we will show how to create a custom paging with HTML grid. We will render 5 records per page, and then on click of next and previous button we will fetch the next 5 or previous 5 correspondingly from database. We will use BootStrap for design, and I also suggest you to watch the previous parts, that is rendering simple grid in MVC5 and add, edit and delete with HTML grid in MVC5. So watch these videos as well, so you'll be in flow. And we have used the same example as we have used in the part 1 and part 2, so we'll be moving ahead in the same way. So let's see the application. So we have a simple ASP.NET MVC5 application where we have a home controller. So you can see here we have implemented add, edit and delete functionalities to the grid. We have a simple model class, that is employee, and we are having few properties for the employee. We have created a grid context as we are using code first approach. So we have inherited DB context, and we have declared employees as our DB set. And this is the view where we are rendering the entire grid. Now as we are having the employees as our DB set, similarly the code first approach has created the database. So if you query the data, we have currently this data, and if you see it on the UI, it looks like this. So this is the grid with all the functionalities. So let's decide how we are going to plan our paging. So what we are going to do, so this is the method which returns the employee list to the index view. So what we are going to do, we are going to pass only 5 employees here, and we are going to set a variable here using the view bag, and we'll say current page is 1, and we are going to render that variable in a hidden field. And then on click of next or previous, we are going to calculate using the jQuery the next or previous page, and then we are going to post that page number to another function that we are going to create here, and then we are going to fetch the next 5 or previous 5 based on the button click. So let's start and wire up the things. So for now, instead of to list, I'm going to pick only 5. So take link function helps us to achieve this, and I'm going to set one variable here. So I say viewBag dot current page is equal to 1, as this is my first page. Now I'm going to render this variable on my view. So let's create, so this is the div which is responsible for rendering the grid. We are going to create one more div here below this, and we create input type hidden, and we are going to give its id as current page. Similarly name, as we are going to fetch, as we are going to post this value to the server side, so we need to give name attribute as well. And value, we are going to set the value of viewBag. Okay, and as we are going to post this data, we are going to have this everything inside a form. So let's render form as well. So we are going to use html.begin form helper and put this hidden field inside the braces. And let's create 2 buttons which will navigate the table. So my first button is the previous one, so I name it as previous. Similarly my value will be previous. Similarly, let's have one more button, and this button will be next. Okay, fine till now. So now on click of these buttons, I'm going to call jQuery functions. So let's have a script section inside our view itself. Text JavaScript. Okay, so inside document.ready, I'm going to wire up events, click event to these buttons. So I say when I'm going to click previous button, so I use click function, and on click of this button I'm going to call a function that is set, let me name it as calculate and set page. So this function will calculate next or previous page based on the button click, and it will assign it at this value so that when the form is posted, the new value is posted to the server. Similarly, I'm going to create it for next as well. Next, and to this function I'm going to pass previous so that we know which button is clicked, and once this button is clicked I'm going to use element selector to select form. I'm going to call submit function on the form so that once the calculation and hidden field is set, I'm going to submit the form to the server. Now let's write the method which is going to do the calculation. So my function name is calculate and set page, and I'm going to accept a variable which will say whether the button is previous or next type. So I say moving type is my variable name, and inside this I'm going to access the value of this hidden field. So I say where current page is equal to, I'm going to use id selector, and I'm going to use val function to get its value, and now I'm going to calculate the things. Now if my moving type is previous, so if my moving type is previous, I'm going to say current page minus minus. So I'm decrementing the current page, and I'm going to have an else if, and I'm going to say if my moving type is next, then I'm going to increment the current page by 1. Now in order to do these operations I need to have this variable in integer form, so I'm going to pass it using parse it int function so that we have it in integer form and we can perform the mathematical operation. Else I'm going to show an alert saying something is wrong. Okay, so our calculation is done. Now after the calculation I'm going to set my hidden field again with the updated value. Okay, so I use the val function again, and our updated value is current page. So once this calculation and set page is done, then the form is submitted. So this form is submitted to the server side, so we need to have a server side function to hold the value of this form. So let's create a server side function, and we say index is the one, and we are going to decorate it with http post attribute, and inside this function I'm going to accept a variable with the same name of our hidden field, so that when the form is posted, the model binding can pick it up from the request, the value, and populate this current page. So now what we are going to do, we are again going to return the view, and this time we are going to employ one formula. So that formula is using the skip method. So what skip method does, skip method takes the count, so it will skip those many records. So our count will be current page minus, so let's put it in a parenthesis, minus 1 into our page size. Okay, and then we are going to do take 5. So what's wrong here? Okay, this should be int. I'm sorry. Now what happens here? Now suppose this is the current page first and you did next, so this current page comes out to be 2. So 2 minus 1 is 1 again, and 1 into 5 is 5. So what it will do, it will skip the 5 shown here and it will take the next 5. Okay, now suppose the current page is 3 and you clicked 2, you clicked previous, so you'll get current page as 2. 2 minus 1 is 1, so it will skip those records and give you the next 5. So this is how it works. We'll see through try run. So let's wire it up first and then we'll see how it works. So let's now inside this method again we have to set this view back because we are using this view back on our view. So current page, in this case the current page will be the posted one, so we'll set this value to the view back. Okay, so let's now run this application and see whether our paging works or not. So it will take few seconds to run. Let me put a debugger here also. Okay, we got debugger at index method. Now I'm going to return only 5 records, so I press F5. So you can see there are only 5 records shown on the UI. Then you click next, so you get 2 here. So what it's going to do, it is going to skip the first 5 and it will going to render the next 5. Okay, oh, it is showing some error, so that was expected. This error says that the method skip is only supported for sorted inputs in linky to entities and the method order by must be called. So it is basically saying that before skipping something you should order your list by some value. So we are going to order by employee ID because that is the primary key in our table. So let's run the application again. I hope it runs faster than the previous. Okay, so now I'm going to skip the debugger. Okay, now I'm going to click next, so I'm going to press F5 again. So you can see the records from 6 to 10. If I click next again, you can see page is 3. If I click F5, you can see next records. Now let me click on previous, so you can see this time the page size is 2. If you do F5, you can see 6 to 10 records. Again, if you do previous, then again you'll get current page as 1. If you do F5, 1 to 5. Now we have 2 things to do. We have to make this buttons similar to this ad, and there are 2 validations we need to apply. The first one is if you do previous on the first page itself, it's going to crash as there are no records in the database. So we have to handle this case. So how we are going to handle this case is, now we can check here if my current page is equal to 1. Okay, if my current page is 1, then there is no scenario of having a previous. And we are going to check if my moving type is previous, then I'm going to return false. Okay, and at here what I can do, I can put if condition here, that is if this method returns true, then only you submit the form, otherwise form will not be submitted, because there is no use of submitting the form as you are clicking previous on the first page itself. Similarly, I'll wire up in next as well. So similarly here also, if the function returns true, only then we are going to submit the form. And at the end of this function, if everything works fine, then we are going to return true. Okay, so let's run the application again. There was no need to stop the application. I apologize for that. Let me go to the controller and run the application again. So now if you click on previous, nothing is happening, the form is not posting. So this is how you can handle it in the previous. Now what about the next case? Now if you click on next, let me remove the debugger for instance, and let me do continue. And if I do next again, now what happens when you click next again? So it will again going to give me the blank records. So I have to handle this scenario as well. So the previous scenario is quite simple, because on the first page, and you can check the moving type is previous, then you can prevent the form from posting, and you can prevent the previous as well. But in case of next, we are not sure the page size, so you have to first calculate the page size, the maximum page size the table can have. So in order to do that, what we can do, we have to get the count of employees, the total count of employees in the table, then we have to divide it by our page size, and then we have to find the maximum value. So let's check it in the browser itself. So what happens now, suppose my page size is 13, that is in our case, if I divide it by 5, it gives me 2.6. so if you round it off, it gives me 3. Okay, so that gives the correct page size, that is 3. Now what happens if my page size, if I have records 5, now as per the 5 page size, the 11 records should be accommodated in 3, but if I divide it by 5, it gives me 2.2. so by rounding, it will give me 2, so it gives me one page less than 3. So there's a method called as math.seal. So what this seal does is it gives me the upper value always. So if you do 13 divided by 5, it gives me 3. Similarly, if I do 11 divided by 5, it gives me 3. So it gives me always the correct value, that is math.seal, the upper value. So we are going to use the same concept here. So what we are going to do, so here we are going to set one more variable, that is last page. So we are going to say as this could be the last page, there's no pages beyond this, and we are going to employ one formula here. So we are going to fetch the count, so I'm going to fetch the employees here, dot toList dot count, and I'm going to divide it by 5, that is our page size, and then I'm going to use the math class and its function, that is sealing. So in C# we have sealing function, and it will give us the last page. So there's an error, it is saying we only accept double and decimal. So let's convert this value to double. Okay, and this should be fine after this. Okay, now our last page is this, and we are going to store this last page in our index view, and this inside the same form by creating a hidden field. We are going to name it as last page. Okay, we are creating this as a hidden field because as we post this form to this function, again we have to update this view back, that is last page, in this function as well, otherwise next time it won't be rendering. So just to set it in the posted method, we are going to create this. So we say last page is my view back. Okay, so let me check the spelling. Yeah, it's fine. And in this method, I'm going to accept one more parameter, that is last page. Okay, and then I'm going to set this view back with the same parameter. Okay, and at the client side, as we have last page with us now, so we can apply the validation. So here we are going to apply the validation, that is, if current page is equal to my last page, then there's no point of moving forward, and my moving type is next. So in this scenario we are going to return false. Okay, so let's run it and check if it works fine. It's going to take some time, so let me press next. Gives me next records, again next. If I press again next, it's still showing some problem here. Let me figure that out. Okay, I have made a big mistake here. I have not declared and fetched the value of the hidden field, so just excuse me for that. So let me name it as last page. So last page is my, I'm going to parse it to integer. It's int dollar, my id is last page. Okay, now let's refresh the page and do the process again. So if I do click on next, if I do it next again, the form is not posting. If I do previous, again previous, it will not allow. So we have solved the first problem. Let's move to the second one. It's for the design. So let me apply some margins here. So if you check, we have a margin left of 20. So I'm going to apply inline style. I say margin left 20 pixel, and I'm going to apply a class to these buttons so that it looks similar to the add button. So my class is btn primary. Similarly, let's copy this class to the button below. Okay, now let's, oh I'm sorry, I'm putting it in the hidden field. It should be in the button. Let's refresh it. You can see our UI is now fine. So this is how you can implement custom paging using the HTML grid and entity framework. The main methods in the entity framework here are take, that will take only that, it will take a integer value which will take that count of records from the database, and skip is also main because we can skip some number of records and take the further records based on your page size. So this is how you can implement a simple custom paging in MVC code first using entity framework. I hope you like this. Thank you, friends.